My name is Emily Pelley, and I am the Publications Coordinator for Ratio Christi Canada. So Ratio Christi is a ministry that exists to strengthen students in their faith so that they can withstand the challenges they face as they go out into the world. So in the United States, Ratio Christi Press has been the publishing arm of Ratio Christi, and they bring together the most respected scholars and apologists in the Christian world today to address important issues related to Christ and culture. So Ratio Christi Canada is really excited to be able to make these booklets available here in Canada. And we want to highlight just how awesome these resources are, and we're going to do that by interviewing authors of these booklets over the coming weeks and months. So today we are joined by Dr. Neil Shenvi. Welcome.
Hi, Emily. Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks for taking the time to chat with us. Can you just give us a little introduction of yourself? Tell us who you are and what you're up to.
Sure. I'm Dr. Neil Shenvi. I have a PhD in theoretical chemistry and worked for a while in academia at Yale and at Duke until I quit my job to homeschool my 4 kids, who are now 16, 14, 12, and 10. So they're getting ready to go out into the world. And so I got involved in this area of research a few years ago when I began noticing a shift in culture and in the church with regard to how we were talking about race, class, and gender, and that made me do a deep dive into these critical theories that I realized were so prevalent in our culture today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Such a relevant topic. So the booklet that you wrote with Pat Sawyer for Ratio Christi Press was called Engaging Critical Theory and the Social Justice Movement. So why don't you start us off? Can you give us a kind of a definition? What is critical theory?
Critical theory is an area of knowledge that grew out of Karl Marx's theorizing in the mid-1800s and then expanded significantly with the introduction of neo-Marxist thought through the Frankfurt School and people like Antonio Gramsci. And that was like 100 years ago even. So today, critical theory is this broad area of knowledge that encompasses disciplines like critical race theory, queer theory, critical pedagogy, post-colonial theory, and things like fat studies. There are a lot of critical social theories, but all of them are concerned with power. How does power operate to produce winners and losers, the oppressors and the oppressed?
All right. So I'm just going to read a quote from your booklet. This is on page 17. While these basic tenets of contemporary critical theory are sometimes articulated explicitly, they can also emerge more subtly through seemingly harmless or even laudable slogans. In this way, Christians often imbibe ideas deeply rooted in critical theory without realizing it. So that really struck me. So I wanted to get your thoughts. What do you feel are the most deceptive parts of critical theory? What is kind of like the main stumbling block that Christians seem to be falling prey to more than others?
Like many postmodern theorists, critical theorists tend to redefine words, and they often will co-opt words and concepts that are very Christian. So ideas like justice, knowledge, truth, morality, oppression, these are Christian ideas. We find words like oppression in the Bible, but critical theorists have redefined those words. And oftentimes Christians don't realize until it's too late that they are using critical theorist definitions of those words. And by that time, it's really seeped into their thinking, affecting everything from how they view gender and sexuality to how they view justice and even redemption.
So it is a redefinition of terms.
Yeah. So, for example, critical theorists define oppression not solely in terms of tyranny or coercion or cruelty, but in terms of these subtle systems of power and norms and values that suffuse society and produce marginalized groups and powerful groups. So to them, anytime a majority group, anytime the ruling class imposes their values on culture, that is oppression. Now, you might think, well, isn't it oppression when some powerful group imposes their values on culture? And the answer is no. This is how deeply it's gotten into the water in our culture. For example, when straight white men impose the gender binary on culture, is that oppression? No. Doesn't matter who imposes the gender binary on culture, it is a reality. It's actually out there. It is God's idea. And so, sure, they could even do it with bad motives, maybe. But it doesn't matter. The gender binary is not a mechanism of oppression. It is built into the fabric of reality itself. So we have gotten so used to thinking in these terms, in terms of, well, oppression is when the ruling class imposes their values on culture, and we have to listen to the lived experience of marginalized groups, and we have to, justice means that we restore power imbalances. Those are all critical theory's ideas, but we often, without knowing it, embrace them. I had a friend once who told me, well, sin is oppression. And I said to him, well, idolatry, worshiping statues, is that oppression? He's like, no. I said, is it sin? He's like, yes. Okay. So real oppression is sin, but sin is not just oppression. And he was a solid believer, but just had absorbed these categories so unthinkingly that that's dangerous.
And you could see how the foundations of postmodernism bleed into this, where there can be multiple realities and multiple truths. To claim that there is a gender binary, for example, you're coming up against, well, that's your truth. That's not truth for everybody. And so you can see that in culture, but you can also hear that sometimes when you're speaking to fellow believers.
Yeah, there is some overlap between postmodern scholars and critical theorists. So it's complicated, but postmodern scholarship is seen as a sort of branch of critical theory. And all these branches have different unique ideas about them. So postmodernism is much more into relativism, whereas critical theory traditionally was a modernist viewpoint. They believed that there was such a thing as reality. I mean, Marx was a modernist, very much so. So again, it's very complicated to trace out all these ideas. But there is overlap between the way postmoderns think and the way that contemporary critical theorists think about knowledge, for example.
Right. Okay, so what advice would you have for believers who discover areas where critical theory has kind of crept into their worldview?
It always goes back to thinking in terms of biblical categories. So when you hear words like oppression or justice or marginalized or minoritized, agency, trauma, all these words that are catch buzzwords in our culture, ask yourself, is it a biblical word? And if so, how does the way the culture is defining that word differ from how the Bible defines it? Maybe they're the same, maybe not. The word gender, traditionally, gender is a synonym for sex. But today, obviously, gender does not just mean sex. It means something very different. So you cannot assume that people are using words the same way. And once you're aware of the difference, you have to really do the work to make sure that your understanding is rooted in Scripture.
Well, that's good advice. Okay, so is there a main takeaway that you would want people to have after reading this booklet that you wrote?
I think because it's an introduction, it's supposed to be just an appetizer to get you interested in these ideas. I hope you pick up some other books, frankly, and really study this worldview. As we argue in the booklet and elsewhere, this way of thinking functions as a worldview. It's a comprehensive lens through which we view reality. So it's not the kind of thing you sort of pick up and study for 5 minutes before No, it's more like trying to understand Islam or Buddhism or naturalism. It takes years to really grasp the intricacies of these disciplines. Now, I'm not saying it takes years to understand critical theory, but at least put more than 5 minutes into it. So the booklet, we wanted to give you a very quick introduction. It's like 28 pages long to these ideas, but there's so much there, and Christians are just ill-equipped right now to deal with these ideas. They don't even know they're there. So if you want more, Pat and I have written a longer book called Critical Dilemma, which is really comprehensive, and it has something like 800 footnotes and thousands of words of direct quotes from critical theorists. I also am frustrated that a lot of Christians will pick up a book that is their favorite pundit expounding on these ideas with very little source material. We try to give you a truly accurate, precise understanding of the knowledge area without interjecting our own opinions for the first half of the book. First half is just about what are these ideas? What are these ideas? What do they say? And then after that, after we've shown you what these ideas are, then we critique them. But I think it's important because as I've seen both, there are lots of books out there that are woke books that are selling soft peddling critical theory to Christians. Oh, it's not so bad. Then there are anti-woke books, and I'm anti-woke, but they often, don't do a good job of explaining these theories in their own terms.
Yes.
So I would encourage you, by all means, read the booklet. But if you're interested in it, please get other resources. And the best advice always is read primary sources.
Yes.
Pick up texts by Robin DiAngelo, Ibram X. Kendi. Pick up an anthology of critical race theory. In our book, we have hundreds of sources you can look through and to find more information. But get acquainted with this. This is our culture. If you're evangelizing progressive people, politically progressive people, they are embracing this worldview, and you have to understand it to reach them effectively.
Yeah, that is really good advice. Get to the primary sources, understand what people are saying. And yeah, let this booklet be a jumping off point. If this is catching your interest, look at the sources, follow good scholars, and see what they have to say about this. So before I let you go, why don't you tell us what you're working on right now?
So we're actually about to publish a sequel to Critical Dilemma called Post-Woke. So Critical Dilemma, it is pretty comprehensive. It's 500 pages long. It's got 800 primary footnotes. It's about 200 primary sources on critical theory. So it's your one-stop shop for all of these theories, for queer theory, critical race theory. We talk about the history of these theories. So that's it's good, but it was a lot of people reached out to us and said, "Hey, I loved it, but I'd love something more accessible to give to my kids, my classmates, my coworkers, maybe people that aren't quite as interested in the theory." So Post-Woke, our new book coming out in January, it's not just a sequel. It's a practical guide to how to deal with these ideas on the ground. And more than that, how to think about race, gender, and sexuality as Christians. So we're less critical. We are critical, but we less critique the theories than show you the right way to think about race and gender and sexuality as Christians. So it's very practical. It's shorter. It's about 250 pages, so half the size. And it's something you wanted to hand to a high school student, a college student, your small group friend. That would be much more accessible to them than Critical Dilemma. But they're both good books, I thought.
All right, Post-Woke. We will watch for that for sure. All right, so Engaging Critical Theory and the Social Justice Movement, written by Dr. Neil Shenvi and Dr. Pat Sawyer. Thank you for your time today. If you would like to purchase one of these booklets and you're in Canada, you can go to press.ratiochristi.ca. And if you're in the US, you can go to press.ratiochristi.org. And these booklets are available as ebooks and paperback. So thank you for your time, Dr. Shenvi. Have a great day.
Thanks, Emily.